We have already learned from Whitaker's opening statement, which we received in advance, that he plans to invoke executive privilege when it comes to his conversations with the president. That's no surprise, but it is a disappointment. Let's go live to MSNBC's Garrett Haake on the Hill. Garrett, yesterday, as we said, was a chess match between Democrats and Matt Whitaker, but there he is today. Sounds like we maybe aren't going to get much.
Yeah, we'll find out who wins in the checkmate portion of this chess match in the next hour or so once the questioning gets started here. Democrats have made it very clear. They want to know what directives the acting attorney general got from the president about the Mueller investigation, how he came to some of the decisions he did, including the comments he made a few weeks ago, suggesting that the investigation might be wrapping up. And Whitaker, in his opening statement, draws a line in the sand and says he's not going to talk about his communications with the president. Now, under Republican control of the House over the last 2 years, those disagreements were largely left to lie. Democrats have been threatening that in this case they would invoke a subpoena. This was the back and forth yesterday. Whitaker told the House Democrats yesterday if a subpoena came out, he wasn't going to participate. We will see how this standoff ends. Does a subpoena come out in this hearing today? Does Whitaker get up and walk out of the room? Do House Democrats really want to test that at this phase with somebody who's only going to be in this job for about another week? We expect the vote on a soon-to-be new Attorney General Bill Barr to happen next week. So Whitaker's time is limited here, but his information is considered very valuable to Democrats, and they're going to try any way they can to get at it today. Whether we have the first real come-to-blows moment between the administration and House Democrats today over this issue of executive privilege and how officials can invoke it, we will find out shortly. But this is the tip of the iceberg. Democrats are going to be going after information about how the president and his appointees have impacted the Mueller investigation in a lot of different ways over the course of the next few months. And we're going to learn a lot about how they plan to do that once the questions start for Matthew Whitaker.
Stranger than fiction. Welcome to Capitol Hill. All right, joining me now, former Assistant U.S. Attorney and Law Professor at the University of Baltimore, Kim Wehle, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General and Washington Post columnist, Harry Litman, and my panel, Mark and Rick, still here. All right, Harry, executive privilege. Does that mean we're getting nothing?
Short answer is yes. Sorry about that. But if he's going to stop a baby step away from invoking it, and I think this is what the chess match was about yesterday, and he's essentially pinned Nadler. What he's going to say is anything that could be executive privilege, my conversations with Trump, I won't answer. That's not the same as a formal invocation, but I think they've indicated.
But what's in terms of getting the answers, what does it matter if it's right next to a formal or it is a formal? Is he answering or not?
No, and the difference is for court terms. If he says executive privilege, they say here's your subpoena. He says see you in court. And maybe a few years pass. What they're going to want, I think, now is as much information as they can, and there will be. He will want to keep this dull. Talk about normal department priorities, et cetera. The Dems, I think, will try to question him in a sort of open-ended way, get him a little bit talking on certain key issues and tease it out. But it's clear on two things it's going to be contentious and frustrating. Any conversations with Trump, and then his opening statement makes clear that he follows the party line on the southern border and how much drugs are coming in through there. Of course, they're flying over. It's nothing that's being interdicted that the wall would help. But that'll be the second kind of bone of contention at the hearing, I think.
Kim, he knows what questions are coming. Democrats have already provided a list. So how's he going to handle all of it?
Well, the key question, as was indicated, is what happens when he doesn't answer pointed questions about his relationship with Mr. Trump. And what the difference between a subpoena and a non-subpoenaed testimony like he is now has to do with the contempt power, the ability to say you're in violation of a subpoena, and therefore we can go to court through the Justice Department to force you to testify. And it's that piece that I think Mr. Whitaker has been trying to avoid. He had the questions in advance. He could have formally asserted executive privilege. And that way, I think he's just kind of hedging a little bit to try to, on the one hand, comply with it. On the other hand, not be in a position to be forced to actually disclose this information. Now, of course, he's also under an obligation obligation to tell the truth, which I think in all things Trump and these days has to be a concern for any witness that's had a relationship with Mr. Trump.
This will be the first big test, Rick, of the president's executive privilege strategy.
Don't make me defend the president, but
I'm not.
Questions? No, I know you're not. But when it comes to conversations with the president, those should be. I think they should be protected because presidents want to have, and this is not just for Donald Trump. This will be for the next president, or then and the next Democratic president. We want to conversations with the president. You want the president to be able to speak freely to get advice, and that shouldn't be subject to public review all the time. So, in that sense, if it's narrowly on that point, I think then they're on firm ground. It will be interesting to see why Whitaker, if he'll answer the question, announced that the investigation was soon wrapping up on the eve of Roger Stone having his house raided and all that legally, and all that material that they gathered, which would indicate this investigation is nowhere near close to wrapping up.
What's your take, Mark?
With all due respect to Rick and executive privilege, maybe even with
he's about to disagree with you.
I hope so.
Because I said with all due respect.
And I hope
when with all due respect comes at you, like, get ready. Yeah.
Even if I want to agree with you to some extent on other cabinet secretaries, the Attorney General is supposed to maintain a certain level of objectivity when it comes to specific matters, like the law, and perhaps even like what the special counsel is doing.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.